Atlanta, Georgia, site of the 1996 Centennial Olympic Games, is quiet now, but not too far away in the distance. The silence is being broken by the roar of 10,000 horses on a quarter mile. NHRA Winston Drag Racing comes to ESPN Speed World at the 17th Annual Fram Nationals from Atlanta Dragway in Commerce, Georgia. Action is the name of the game here at Atlanta Dragway in this 17th annual running of the Fram Nationals. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave McClelland, and you know, this has not been the best of seasons for the Coletta camp. Connie and Scott both have had troubles throughout the first 5 races of this season. In fact, just a week ago, they both failed to qualify for the 8-car field at the Winston Invitational at Rockingham. But in the final qualifying session here, Connie struck gold. He qualified with a great 4:75 elapsed time, and on that run, he bumped out his son, Scott. Scott came back later in the session, attempted to qualify the American International Airways car, but could not do it. Dejected hardly describes Scott Coletta's demeanor. In the first round of Top Fuel racing here at Atlanta, Connie was paired with Kristen Powell. In fact, it was the best run of the first round. Connie improved on his qualifying time with a 4:73, making that the low elapsed time of eliminations in round number 1. Where did Connie find the key to success? Where did all that power come from in both qualifying and in that first round? Well, let's find out and go directly to the source, the crew chief, Ed McCulloch. Well, what did you guys do different? What happened?
Well, Dave, it's there. It's been there all along, and it's still there. We just have to make the right adjustments, turn the right screws, and get it hooked up on this racetrack, and it's there.
You got a tough competitor in round 2 in Kenny Bernstein.
We sure do.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Right now, let's join Alan Reinhardt for the Story and Funny car.
Well, Dave, the Story and Funny car is Team Castrol. So what else is new? What is new here this weekend is that John Force waited until the last qualifying session to take the number 1 spot when he ran a 4:99. That set him up with a first round encounter with nobody. Paul Smith qualified 16th, hurt the car in qualifying, and decided just to sit out eliminations. So John had a nice, easy solo run that ended up with a 5:18 as he headed into round number 2. Now, you may remember that last year at this race, the Castrol cars had to race each other. It was Tony Pedregon beating the boss in the final round for his first national event win. Well, that's not going to happen this year, because with Tony coming out of the number 4 qualifying spot, the way they line up, if they should race, they would meet in the semifinals. But before Tony can race the boss, he's going to have to deal with his brother, Cruz Pedregon, in that McDonald's car in round number 2. Now for the Story in Pro Stock, let's catch up with the third member of our broadcast team, Bill Stevens.
In Pro Stock lately, it's almost like engine hopscotch. On any given weekend, you can never be too sure who's running whose engine in whose race car. This is Larry Morgan's Pro Stock Pontiac, and that's the engine that he built. He also leases engines, and there's one just like this one in the car of Mike Edwards. Coincidentally, they met up in round 1 of Pro Stock here in Atlanta, and it wasn't long before things got very unusual. Just before the run, Larry, who had lane choice, decided to switch lanes with Mike, and maybe he knew something. It was a pretty good drag race until about 1,000 feet, and then things started to go very awry for Mike Edwards. After careening on top of the retaining wall, the car came to a stop, and because these things are built so ruggedly, Mike was okay. Well, obviously, Larry Morgan won that run, and in round number 2, he'll be racing Steve Schmidt, another engine builder who not only builds them for himself, but for a bunch of other guys. And with the nitro cars getting ready to rip right now, let's go back to Dave McClelland.
Underway with round number 2 of Top Fuel Eliminator. Here is Tony Schumacher at the wheel of the layback machine. His opponent, the former Winston champ who has fallen on hard times, the Pennzoil dragster driver, the Silver Fox himself, Eddie Hill. Talking about that Winston points and the championship, a very slim lead held by Joe Amato coming into this event over Gary Celsi. Only 2 points separate them. Kenny Bernstein, Mike Dunn, and Bob Vandergriff round out the top 5. Here are the pairings for round number 2. You can check back into round 1, take a look. Maybe you'll find your favorite there and find out, did they advance or did they go out of competition in the first round. Tony Schumacher qualified at this event in the number 13 spot. He defeated Bruce Sarver in the first round. His qualifying time was a 4:85, used a 4:89 to beat Sarver. Eddie Hill qualified in the 12th position at a 4:83, but slowed to a 5:90, beating Mike Dunn in round one, and he's got engine problems right off the line. Tony Schumacher to the semifinals, 4:94 at only 262 miles an hour. Hill, you saw the problem, slowing only 2:39 at an elapsed time of a 5:12. Tough break for Eddie Hill. This has not been the best of years. ESPN's coverage of the 17th Annual Fram Nationals is being brought to you by All Pro and Bumper to Bumper, the auto parts specialists. And by Pennzoil, formulated for today's stop and go driving. Stop, go Pennzoil. Stick around, more Top Fuel next. Welcome back to Atlanta Dragway and the NHRA Fram Nationals. If you'll recall, I told you that Joe Amato had a 2-point lead over Gary Selsey coming into this race here at Atlanta. This driver, Jim Head, played a major role in what happened in the first round because he was matched against Joe Amato. Both cars left well, but Amato immediately went up into smoke and watched as Head streaked across the finish line. Amato's points lead disappeared that quickly. Here now is Jim Head in round number 2, the close call phone card special. Qualified in the number 11 spot at a 4:83. He ran that 4:82 to beat Joe in the first round. His opponent, Larry Dixon, at the wheel of Don Prudhomme's Miller Lite machine. He defeated Paul Romine in his first round race with a 5:47. Both Romine and Dixon had some problems. Dixon in qualifying had a 4:86, so on paper, Head is by far the quicker car. Not only was Head quicker on paper, he was quicker off the starting line and in elapsed time as well. 4:95 at only 2:75 for Jim. Larry Dixon trailed at a 4:97 at 2:88. Let's take a look at that one again. Head's reaction time advantage was about 100th of a second, but he had a much quicker 60-foot and 330-foot time, which put him well ahead of Dixon by the time they reached the halfway point. Little tire smoke, loss of traction. Jim Head crosses the finish line first. Alan?
Jim, that was closer than you like him and slower than you like him at 95.
Big ugly. I don't know. We're having real clutch problems, and it eats the motor when the clutch goes haywire, but the close call team will take that close call. We need to win.
Is that just a matter of the engine over-revving when it blows through the clutch or what?
What it does, it blows through the clutch and drops a couple cylinders, so it's on 6 cylinders, and they're working awful hard. And that's the real problem. We get this clutch fixed, this car's going to be real quick.
That would explain why there's a little bit of oil on the back of this thing.
Fortunately, not on the track.
Jim Head into the semifinal round. Next pair, 2 veteran drivers. Johnny Coletta in the American International Airways car. His opponent, and you're riding on board on a great camera angle looking down at the power plant in the Bud King machine, driven by Kenny Bernstein. He qualified 7th at a 4:78, ran 4:80, beating Shelley Anderson in round 1. You saw Connie top Kristen Powell in the first round with a 4:73 after his 4:75 qualifying effort Saturday night put him in the number 2 spot. Bernstein, fresh off the big win up at the Winston Invitational 1 week ago, that he picked up a cool $100,000 cash for that victory in the richest drag race in the world. Bernstein by half a car length over Coletta. The winning time of 4:79 at 2:89. the losing time for Connie not all that far off the mark, 4:86 at 286 miles an hour. So Bernstein now has not only qualified at a 478, 480 was his first round win time. Here a 479 is beginning to show the consistency that Bernstein has been famous for throughout his entire career, both in funny car and in Top Fuel. Bernstein into the final four. Here's Corey McLenithan. The driver of the McDonald's machine is matched against the man that has gone into the lead in the Winston Points chase as a result of Amato's first round loss. We're talking about the Team Winston car, driven by Gary Selzy. Alan Johnson, the car owner and the crew chief, put him in the number one spot at a 466. Selzy qualified light years ahead of everybody else. 480 for Corey McLenithan was his qualifying time. He beat Tommy Johnson Jr. with a 5:01 in the first round. Selzy slowed from that torrid qualifying pace to only a 4:92 to take out the number 16 qualifier Doug Herbert in his first round matchup. Instantly, Corey McLenithan goes up in smoke, and there's another 20 points for Gary Selzy. 475 at 300 miles an hour, certainly keeping pace with the rest of the field. In fact, just a little bit ahead of some of the times we have seen thus far in round number two. Here's the pairings. Selzy against Schumacher. Gary gets the lane choice. Kenny Bernstein will pick his lane against Jim Head in the final four. Down at the far end of the racetrack, let's go to Alan Reinhardt.
Another win light, a solid elapsed time, and 20 more of those valuable Winston points.
And it's dry, but boy, was this thing moving around down there on the top end. But AJ, he knows his stuff, and we're ready. I think we're okay.
Still ran 300.
Yeah, well, not bad, huh?
Not bad at all. Great tuning job by Alan Johnson for a very tricky racetrack. Funny car action coming your way next. Stay with us. Welcome back to Atlanta Dragway. It is time for the thunder of the nitro-burning funny cars. Same power plants as you see in those Top Fuel machines, some 6,000 to 7,000 horsepower each. Our ESPN Street World coverage of the Fram Nationals now moves to round number two of funny car competition, and this has become the greatest family feud in motorsports. The Pedregon brothers battling it out. Tony is in second behind John Force in the Winston Point standings. Al Hoffman, Chuck Etchells, and Whit Bazemore coming into this event in the top five. Here are the pairings for round number two. You see how the two Pedregon brothers advance. Okazaki and Capps were their victims. The other half of the ladder finds two of the rising stars of funny car racing. Whit Bazemore challenging Tim Wilkerson, while Randy Anderson goes up against Gary Bolger. That's the Cruiser at the wheel of the McDonald's machine. These are two of the best funded teams in all of motorsports. Pedregon driving for Coach Joe Gibbs, the NFL Hall of Fame coach, and of course Tony Pedregon, the teammate of John Force. Cruiser qualified fifth at a 5:10, ran 5:20, beating Capps. Tony Pedregon qualified at a 5:09 in the number 4 spot and slowed to a 5:58 to beat a tire-smoking Kenji Okazaki in round number one. The head-to-head matchup between these two drivers is in Tony's favor at the moment. 5 wins to 4 for his brother Cruz. Both of them smoking the tires in the middle of the course. And apparently some problems for Tony. You saw the hatch fly out of the middle of the hood. That relieves pressure underneath in case something goes wrong with the engine or the supercharger. The gaping hole of the Castrol hood indicates some problem inside that engine compartment. Take a look at this run. The thing to watch here is for the tire smoke in the middle of the racetrack. All the drivers talking about how difficult it is to negotiate this 1,320 feet because you lose traction right there at about the 1/8 of a mile. Tony was able to recover quicker and improved his batting average against his brother to 6-4. That's the score after this round number 2 win for Tony here at the Fram Nationals. Next pair of cars, the Parts America Haviland machine. The body of the Pontiac coming down over the roll cage with Randy Anderson strapped tightly inside. As Randy gets ready for his run, let's go to Allen with the Cruiser.
Every time the two brothers get together, it's a war. That one was no different.
Yeah, it was a war. It was our turn to win that. We're very disappointed out here. You know, we've been struggling a little bit. The car's very loose upstairs, but my guys did a great job. I feel bad for them. They worked awful hard this year, but you know, we let a heartbreaker down there again. But we're gonna even up the score pretty soon on them boys. We're getting sick of it.
I would think so. It's hard enough to tangle with John Force, but when you got to cope with your brother as well. Here is the opponent for Randy Anderson. This is Gary Bolger. He upset Freddie Neely in the first round from his 14th qualifying spot. Randy qualified 6th at a fine 5:11. Then in round number 1, he improved on that to run 5:10 when he beat Del Worship. Crew Chief Larry Frazier has things in hand for the Parts America Haviland car of Randy Anderson. A 5:19 at 271 miles an hour advances Randy to his first ever semifinal round. Lots of action going on Kenny Bernstein's race car. We'll be watching him in a few moments. Huge crowd on hand today here in Atlanta Dragway for the 17th annual running of the Fram Nationals. And here's the guy that most everybody loves to watch and to cheer for. The driver of the Castrol car, John Force. 6 times a Winston champion. The 1996 Driver of the Year for all of motorsports. John Force won 13 races a year ago. But this one at Atlanta was not one of them. As John gets into his long burnout procedure, his opponent generally waits a little while. And that's exactly what Mark Oswald did. They have it all worked out. They'll end up at the starting line at just about the same moment. Oswald qualified 8th at a 5:12, defeated Dean Scusa in the first round with a 5:23. Look at the qualifying time for Force, 4:99, ran 5:18 on that single in round number 1 when Paul Smith could not answer the call. John sitting inside the roll cage, waiting patiently for his crew headed by Austin Coyle to make whatever adjustments they do to that engine. Mark Oswald approaching the starting line into the staging procedure, which involves lighting those lights up at the top of the 3 infrared beams stretch across the starting line. As the drivers roll forward, they turn on the top light. That indicates they're about 8 inches away from the actual starting line. When that second light comes on at the top of the tree, the starter knows they're ready. John Force, again, the class of eliminations, 5:07 at 294 miles an hour as Mark Oswald went up in smoke instantly off the starting line. Here are those 2 young stars I referred to earlier. Tim Wilkerson in the far lane. In the near lane, Whit Bazemore. Down at the far end, Alan Reinhardt.
1 year ago, this weekend on this racetrack, Tony whooped you in the final for his first win. Now you got to race him in the semis.
I am starting to feel like his dad. Every time I loan him a car to go out and play, he wounds it and brings it back. That ain't driver error, though. That's crew chiefs. But we're excited. It's 2 Castrol teams in the final, 2 Ford Mustangs. And we'll see if he can whoop me again.
You got lane choice. Is that worth anything here?
Well, I don't know. I think the lanes actually, they were announcing that Cruiser took the other lane, or Tony did, but actually Cruz had the lane choice. We were both going to run the right. We don't care.
Lane choice goes to the driver with a quicker elapsed time, either from qualifying in round 1 or in the second round from their first round victories. Here is Tim Wilkerson backing up after his burnout. This is the Team Winston Mustang, the fastest funny car in the world. Whit Bazemore qualified 15th at a 5:32, ran a 5:62, beating Gary Densham in the first round. Wilkerson had a 5:19 qualifying and a 5:27 round 1 time when he beat Chuck Etchels. The Napa Auto Parts NGK machine, one to be feared by any driver on this racetrack. Bazemore surprised everybody a couple of races ago when he blasted the quarter mile at over 313 miles an hour. One great race, and Whit Bazemore almost closed the gap, but by a few feet. Tim Wilkerson came home the winner at a 5:26, 233 mile an hour pace. Bazemore had a very slight advantage off the starting line, but he could not hold on to it. Wilkerson moved ahead in the middle of the racetrack, but watch as we focus in at the finish line. Wilkerson's got a fairly good lead right there at the halfway point. Now, watch Bazemore trying to reel him in. The only problem for Whit, he just ran out of racetrack. The margin of victory, just about 3 feet. So here are the pairings for the Final Four. Randy Anderson against Wilkerson. It'll be Force against Pedregon.
What a drag race, Tim. 0.06 of a second. Did you even know?
Oh, wow. I got down there and I was driving the thing with one hand, tugging on the brake so hard, and it got over next to the center line, and I lifted and I heard him coming, and I thought, oh, man, I just screwed up. I need to tell you, I'm real happy racing Whit. He's not only got a great sponsor for himself, but this is really the sports sponsor. Without them, none of us would be here. So thanks, Winston. Thank all of my guys, too. Thanks.
And he's happy to be going to the semis. Good job, man.
Yeah.
Not just the semis. This season, he has not yet made it past the first round until, of course, this weekend in Atlanta. We're ready for the factory hot rods, and Jim Yates is ready to take on all comers. He had the lead coming into this race over Warren Johnson. Kurt, Mark, and Jerry round out the top 5. Our pairings for round number 2. WJ against Tom Martino. Kurt Johnson against Bruce Allen. Jim Yates will race Mike Thomas, and Steve Schmidt challenging Larry Morgan. The Pro Stock field here, very close indeed. Jim Yates had quite a qualifying session. He missed the number 1 spot by just about 0.04 of a second. Qualified in the number 2 position and defeated Ray Franks in the first round with a 7:01. Mike Thomas, his opponent, was the number 7 qualifier at a 6:98. Troy Coughlin, the victim of the gum out machine in the first round, where Thomas slowed to a 7:33. Mike Thomas, the 16th member of the Holly 6-Second Club, when he qualified at a 6:98. He became the final member of that very elite group. Red light start for Mike Thomas. This race was over at the starting line, but Jim Yates runs low elapsed time of the event. 6.94 seconds at 197 miles an hour, and advances to the semifinals. More Pro Stocks next. Pro Stock drivers have a strange habit. Like so many other racers, they name their engines. Steve Schmidt.
Well, we just thought it'd be kind of fun if we started naming them, and actually some of my guys in the shop thought of that. So as things evolved, guys took turns in the shop. It was their turn for the next engine to name them, and kind of became fun.
Schmidt is not the only Pro Stock racer that has that habit. Here's Larry Morgan.
One that's real good you'd want to name Sparky, or it just depends. Smiley, yeah, you can name Spanky, Pistol Pete, anything. Pistol. Yeah, there's a lot of names you could give them.
Personally, I'd want to name my engine Win Every Time, if it could. Here's Steve Schmidt. He qualified at a 7:01. That was 14th. In the first round, he beat Jerry Ekman with a big improvement at a 6:98. Larry Morgan qualified at that time with a 6:98. He turned around and beat Mike Edwards in the first round with a 6:99. 500 cubic engine displacement. That's as big as you can use in pro stock racing. You run on racing gasoline through 2 giant Holley 4-barrel carburetors. All the cars using 5-speed transmissions, and they must weigh no less than 2,350 pounds with the driver on board. Highly competitive racing. Steve Schmidt by the car length gets to the finish line first with another 6-second elapsed time. 6:99 at 197. That advances him into the semifinal round. Burnout's underway at the starting line. It'll be Kurt Johnson in the near lane in the AC Delco car. The Slick 50 machine, Bruce Allen in the far lane. Now down to the far end with Alan Reinhardt.
Based on qualifying, Steve, I wouldn't have given you a whole lot of chance, but whatever you got straightened out in this car.
Well, my crew chief, Mark Ingersoll, Kenny, David, they've done a heck of a job. We just had struggled, as I said earlier, with this racetrack, but I think we're on it today.
Another 6-second lap, 99.
Should have ran better than that, but we'll take it.
Always want more. That could be the name of an engine as well. Here is Bruce Allen. He qualified in the 5th spot with a 6:98 and used the same time in the first round when he beat Pete Williams. Kurt Johnson was the number 4 qualifier here with a 6:97. He slowed to a 6:99, beating Ron Krischer in his round 1 match. There are the lights at the top of that Christmas tree. That's what the starter, Rick Stewart, looked for. The engine's starting to come up against the rev limiters. Nearly identical reaction times, and Kurt Johnson has a performance advantage of about 100th of a second. He runs 7 flat. The losing time for Allen was a 7:01. Both drivers running just a hair over 196 miles an hour. The big Goodyear tires just grabbing at that asphalt or the concrete starting line, and as they make their way down this racetrack, maybe swap the lead a couple of times. The lead at any given point was probably a foot, maybe 2 feet in distance. And at the finish line, you'll see just how close this race was. Kurt Johnson pulling it out and going to the Final 4. The Mama Rosa's Pizza Machine, this is Tom Martino. He qualified 9th with a 6:99, and Scott Jeffrey on Redlet against him in the round number 1 race. The number 1 qualifier, Warren Johnson, with a 6:94 in qualifying. Now that's already been exceeded by a few thousandths of a second by Jim Yates. WJ had a 6:96 in the first round when he beat Terry Adams. Full car length plus for Warren Johnson, and a 6:97 keeps him in the thick of things. 198 miles an hour his speed. Martino trailed with a losing 7:01. So that sets up the Final 4 in pro stock. Here they are. WJ will be racing his son Kurt, and Warren has the lane choice. Yates gets to pick his lane over Steve Schmidt. Alan?
Drove through the clutch big time on that run.
It's not very often I tell anybody that you left on Tom Martino.
Tommy must have not been paying attention. I mean, to leave on Tommy, he's without a doubt one of the best leavers out here. And it just, apparently the first round probably got him a little off because he just didn't really make a full, complete run there. So I think that's probably what affected him.
You know who you have to race next round?
Some kid from Georgia.
His kid from Georgia.
Warren Johnson with a smile on his face. Hey, Tom Martino has won too. Next round, it'll be this man, Kurt Johnson, against his dad. Welcome back to Atlanta Dragway. Along with Bill Stevens and Alan Reinhardt, I'm Dave McClellan, and a huge crowd enjoying all the things to see and do at an NHRA Winston event. But this is what they came to watch. The kings of the sport. Here is the Bud King himself, Kenny Bernstein, the reigning Winston champion. His opponent here in the Final 4 round, the close call phone card special driven by Jim Head. Based on the performances thus far this season, Bernstein is light years ahead of Head. Kenny has run as quick as a 4.60 when he finished runner-up out at Phoenix earlier this year. But this racetrack is going to be tough to find that kind of time. Smoking the tires in the middle of the course. Bernstein advances to the finals. 481. Again, the consistency coming into play at 292 miles an hour. Those 300-mile-an-hour speeds hard to come by thus far this weekend. Here's our next pair. Tony Schumacher is in the lane nearest the camera. He drives that layback machine for the Peak brothers. His opponent, the top qualifier, Gary Scelzi, who had a 466. A little bit earlier, Alan Reinhart dropped by the Scelzi pit area to look at some engine development.
There's an old adage in racing that if you're not moving forward, you're going to get run over, and Alan Johnson has never been one to stand still when it comes to development of new parts. Even though the Team Winston cars won a couple of races this year, they are bringing out the latest in hardware this weekend with a brand new cylinder head. A couple of things that are different: the intake valve is larger. The port also is larger. Remember, the more air you get in, the more horsepower you can make. The exhaust valve is actually smaller, but a different port design speeds up the velocity to get the exhaust gases out more efficiently. Now, this is a brand new piece. The first time they are ever run on the car, right here on ESPN.
Talk about performance. Scelzi has had it this year. Every race he has run in the 460 zone, and this one is no exception. Oh, Schumacher was a lot closer than anybody would have thought. The winning time for Scelzi, 478 at 288. The losing time of 488 for Tony Schumacher. The big difference in that race came at the starting line. Schumacher almost pulled off the upset. Look at the huge lead he had at the Flesh and Green. The layback car way ahead of Scelzi at this point. Gary just had to rely on the tune-up by Alan Johnson. Provide the power and the traction that got him past Schumacher. But it was still a very close race indeed, about a half a car length. The 478 by Scelzi gives him lane choice over Bernstein in the finals. Over to John Force pit area, there's a huge amount of work going on. He's getting ready to race Tony Pendragon. The long smoky burnout's complete for our Pro Stock semi-finalists. This is Johnson & Johnson, father and son, Warren and Kurt. And if you had to pick it, you'd say Warren is the favorite here just based on performance alone. But these two guys race hard, and it is no prisoners taken and none wanted. The purpose is to win this round to make it to the finals. Both these drivers do a lot of testing on this racetrack as they are based in Sugar Hill, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta. So they are as familiar as anyone with track conditions here. Let's see how it works out. Something went wrong in Warren Johnson's car. You could hear the motor just go to the moon. Kurt Johnson takes the win and goes to the finals. A 7:04 at 196 miles an hour. Believe it or not, Warren Johnson actually left on his son in reaction time. As we look again, watch the blue and white GM Performance Parts Pontiac gets the starting line advantage over the AC Delco car. Then when the nose dropped down, that's when something went wrong in the drivetrain. Let's go to Alan.
It's not supposed to be that easy to beat Warren Johnson.
It's not, let me tell you. I seen him out there, he must have left on me, and all of a sudden his fender just disappeared, and I don't know, he must have broke something. And
he definitely broke something. You only went 704, man. That's not enough out here today.
No, we had a transmission problem. I could barely get the car staged, so looks like we both broke.
You'll have to work on it for the final.
Thanks.
His opponent in that round will come out of the next pair, Steve Schmidt and Jim Yates. Earlier, Alan stopped by Schmidt's pit area to take a look at some of the engineering and the design work that goes into his engines.
The cooling systems in these Pro Stock cars are a lot different from in your street car. For one, they pull the water out of the front of the cylinder head instead of the intake manifold. You don't want the extra heat in there. Now, since the water comes out so low, the higher parts of the head will hold steam. So they have to add these lines and nozzles to evacuate the steam from the cylinder head. Otherwise, the head would superheat and crack. Another thing that Steve Schmidt has to do with all of his engines is run the water pump mechanically off the crankshaft instead of electrically. You need the extra vacuum in order for this steam system to function properly.
Just part of the tricks used by today's Pro Stock engine builders. Jim Yates in the McDonald's car, the Pontiac in the far lane. He's got to be the favorite here based on his earlier 694. By about a car length, Yates prevails, 696 at 196. Trailing was Schmidt at a 703 at 197 miles an hour. That sets up the final round in Pro Stock racing, where at least one Johnson made it to the last race. He'll go up against Jim Yates. Yates holding the choice of lanes. Back in a moment to the Fram Nationals, and when we do, it's funny car time. Back at Atlanta Dragway, it is time for the last four cars in competition in funny car racing. It is this driver, Randy Anderson, against Tim Wilkerson. Wilkerson at the wheel of the Napa Auto Parts NGK machine. Doing well here at Atlanta. Now let's go with Alan Reinhardt to the top fuel pit area of Gary Scelzi and Alan Johnson.
Gary Scelzi, you and Kenny have raced twice. You won the first one. He won the second one. It's your turn.
That's the way I've got it figured. I'm going to have to go down there and give Kenny a little talking to.
This car has been incredible all day, all weekend, really.
You know, Alan, he's a master, and I'll tell you what, I'm just fortunate to be driving for Team Winston, and these guys are working their tails off. I hope we have a good time in the final.
You still get butterflies when you go to the starting line?
Are you kidding? I'm sick to my stomach right now.
You'd never know it by the smile on his face. Scelzi, of course, coming out of the alcohol ranks of competition, as are both of these drivers, Randy Anderson and Tim Wilkerson in the far lane. That is Larry Frazier, the crew chief for Anderson. He's looking on and motioning for Randy to stage the car. Some problems here on the Wilkerson car. Look, that's Rick Stewart pointing out something to the crew of Wilkerson's machine. And they don't look happy. They're turning their back, so obviously they've shut the engine off. Randy gets a giant break. Still smoking the tires in the middle of the course, but it doesn't matter. His opponent was left at the starting line with mechanical problems. As they push him back, you see the fluid coming out underneath the race car. Oh, what a disappointment that's got to be for the entire Wilkerson clan. Now let's go check in with our Pro Stock finalists. First, here's Bill Stevens.
You've got the performance advantage so far this weekend.
Well, you know, Rich Purdy, Jerry Bickle, and Bob Ingalls have really got this McDonald's Pontiac running really fast today, and I hope we make another good run in the final. I think we'll give Kurt a handful.
What about the air? Is this going to give you a little bit more power heading into the final?
Well, the air's a lot better than it was 2 rounds ago. We went to 694 flat, so we've tuned the car up a little bit, put a little more clutch in it, and put a little more fuel in it, and we're going to go out there and see if we can set a record.
Remember, Kurt beat Jim Yates on a hole shot last year here in Atlanta. Let's go to Alan.
Is this normal maintenance or is something else going on here?
Nah, we've been slipping the clutch real bad. You know, we decided to change engines here. We know that this engine, I just freshened up at the shop, and it's a real strong engine. Most of it's in the clutch department, though, so we're going to change clutches also.
Brand new motor headed into the final. David?
Oh, while the Yates KJ is a rematch of last year's final, this run in Funny Car Final 4 is the same. Tony Pedregon whipped up on the big boss man 1 year ago to win his first ever national event title. You're looking under John Force's car. How can you tell? That's Austin Coyle adjusting the fuel injection system. John Medlin doing the checking in on his driver, Tony Pedregon, in the opposite lane. The 2 Castrol Mustang, the winner here to go into the final round. Their opponent in that match will be Randy Anderson. A red light by Tony Pedregon. He took a shot at force. 510 at 300 miles an hour. If you thought 300 was tough to come by in top fuel, imagine how much more difficult it is without that giant wing on the back for these funny cars. The red light started about 400ths of a second too soon for Tony Pedregon, and that eliminated him from contention for the final round as John Force will race Randy Anderson.
If I calculate right, between you and your teammates, you've won 3 out of 5 national events this year.
Yeah.
Could be 4.
Well, I don't know. We're having a good year. Tony won a couple races back, and we won Rockingham last week. So we're just trying to build points on the group and see what we can do. You know, we got some new sponsors, you know, with the Mustang Ford and on both cars, me and Tony, and the Syntec power system that come on board. So
tell me about racing the rookie in the final.
I think it'll be exciting. He's doing a great job. That team's got a lot of money behind him with Western Auto, and the kid's just great. He's hungry for a win, and who knows what'll happen here. We're just going to come out here and try to show Castrol how to sell some oil. Job.
John Force sounding like he ran the entire quarter mile. What's the best way to keep up with John and all of drag racing? Well, subscribe to National Dragster by joining the National Hot Rod Association. $57 a year, and if you call the number on your screen right now, you get yourself a free copy of Drag Racing 95. Over in the pit area of Kurt Johnson, they're wrapping up the work. Finals coming up next. Only 3 races remain here at the Fram Nationals, and this is the first of our finals. The Pro Stockers, the factory hot rods. Jim Yates, with low elapsed time of the entire weekend, coming earlier in eliminations at a 6:94, has got the advantage here over Kurt Johnson. He ran quicker in the previous round win. That gave him the lane choice. That right hand or far lane from our camera has been the lane of choice all day. Kurt had a slight advantage at the starting line, but he really could not make it pay off. Kurt losing at a 7:01, another great 6-second elapsed time for Jim Yates, 6:98 at over 196 miles an hour. Watch this one close. Just a very slight advantage for Kurt, but it quickly went away as that McDonald's Pontiac of Yates began to make its move down that racetrack. By the time they reached the finish line, a fairly sizable margin of victory for Jim Yates, even though the time only 300ths of a second separating those two cars. Yates, the 1997 champion of the Fram Nationals, and he's got to be jumping for joy.
That's a pretty good call, Mac. You are jumping for joy, Jim.
Thank God. I tell you, we needed everything we had to beat Kurt Johnson today. You know, they've been doing a good job over there. But I'm going to tell you, Jerry Bickle, Bob Ingalls, and Rich Purdy have done a great job with this McDonald's Dynamax Pontiac today. And I'm just as excited as I could be. Coming here to Atlanta and winning makes us really feel good.
Where a few guys struggled, you were locked in the 6s.
Well, you know, this car is made to run on Sunday. Jerry Bickle was right about that. You know, he built it so it runs on a good track. And, I mean, we got out there today and the track gets a little loose and everybody else is skating around. And this thing just hunts the finish line like an animal. I mean, it is really an animal out there when the track is like this.
Pretty good old drag race. David?
Alan, I would have to agree with you. And Jim Yates extends his Winston Boynt's lead over Warren Johnson. Kurt, Steve Schmidt, and Bruce Allen. That's the completion of the top 5 at the end of this event. Here's Kenny Bernstein, the crew checking everything over to make sure all is well. As Bernstein comes up against the other red car in competition, Gary Selsey and the Team Winston machine. This has developed into quite a rivalry. Selsey's already won 2 races this year. Bernstein has no wins to his credit. And with that run, and look at the jubilation by Dale Armstrong, his crew chief, Kenny Bernstein stays the picture of consistency, a 479 victory over Gary Selsey, the points leader. Off the starting line, Bernstein gave up about 100th of a second to Selsey. But by the time they had reached the finish line, Bernstein's 479 easily outdistanced the 4.90 at only 281 by Selsey. Let's go down to Alan Reinhardt.
Kenny Bernstein, I don't care if it's qualifying, first round, or final round, there is no better racing than the 2 red cars.
It's great racing those guys. They're awful good. I'm just real happy for, obviously Bud and Prolong Mac 2 and Hooters and La Paz and NGK, all our people. Because without them, we can't do it. But for the fans, it's a tough day, tough weekend for this Bud King, believe me.
You looked a little tense after the semifinals, knowing you didn't have lane choice going up against them.
I apologize to both of you guys down here. It's a little tense when you run pretty bad for about 4 days. But Dale Armstrong, Ray Alley, and Bob Brooks and the whole Bud team, they just kept working and working and working. And I don't know what happened in the final, but I was pretty happy with that run.
Spectacular final. Let's see how that shakes up the points, Mac.
Well, Gary Selsey has moved into the lead over Joe Amato. Kenny Bernstein continues to gnaw away at those top points earners. He's in third. Mike Dunn and Connie Coletta, fourth and fifth, respectively. Here's John Force, last year's runner-up against the Nitro rookie Randy Anderson. It's his sister Shelley that drives in the top fuel ranks. Oh, what an upset. As Force smokes the tires, there's the entire Parts America crew celebrating Randy Anderson's first ever Nitro victory in only the 5th race of the year. It was just a few hundred feet off the starting line that John Force lost traction. That white smoke you see is not engine problems, it is spinning tires. John tried to recover. He pedaled the car but could not catch up to Randy Anderson, who did a masterful job of staying ahead. His elapsed time, a subpar 5:38, but hey, he won it.
Randy Anderson, are you believing this?
No way. I'll tell you, this is unbelievable. I saw John. He was out on me, and I tell you, I thought I was in trouble. About that time, he disappeared, and I know I was driving the heck out of mine. It was real loose, but I'll tell you, when he disappeared, I was going to lift for nothing.
I don't blame you. When you're running John Force, you beat the best for your first ever.
I'll tell you, I don't know if we beat him. We got a little bit lucky, but I'll tell you what, for Pontiac, for Western Auto Parts America, Texaco Haviland, this is what it's all about.
There's the point standings. Force, Tony Pedregon, Etchells, Bazemore, and the Cruiser. ESPN's coverage of the 17th Annual Fram Nationals has been brought to you by the more than 1,525 stores across America. AutoZone, the best parts in auto parts. And by Quaker State Motor Oil for a clean running
I saw
engine.
a lot of you. I thought it was over.
The coverage of the Fram Nationals has been produced by Diamond P Sports in association with ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports.